Farming Maven invitations is still a really effective method for making currency in Necropolis League, and I've spent the last day or two cooking up a version of it that I think is really fun. Hi, it's Lerald, and I'm going to talk about farming Shaper Guardian Maven invitations with Domination Scarabs of Terrors, but first don't forget to like and subscribe. Okay, let's just go ahead and get right into this. What is the strategy and what makes it special? We're running Maven invitations quickly. That's not really anything new, that's been around for a couple of years, but what we are doing to spice things up is we are using this scarab right here, Domination Scarab of Terrors, to add a lot of map bosses onto each map. We're also taking thorough exploration in the passive tree, I'll show that off here, and full clearing every map to add a lot of juice onto the map boss and the bonus Maven spawns, because this does apply to them. This, just to read it off, if there are fewer than 50 monsters remaining in your maps, final map bosses are empowered by Wildwood Wisps. As we also know, Destructive Play was changed in this patch to make it so that when she casts up the stakes, summons extra bosses, she'll summon more if there are fewer monsters remaining in the map. I'm pretty sure, actually, now that I think about it, I think I pretty much got 3 extra bosses every single time. Definitely got 2 or 3. I never got 1. And because I had fewer than 50 monsters remaining in every single map by the time I got to the map boss, that also meant that all of those bosses that she was summoning were affected by thorough exploration. So they were quite a bit harder, but unfortunately they were also more rewarding. So I do think it is worth taking thorough exploration. Maybe there is a worthy thorough exploration of comparing this passive bonus and not using it and like over thousands of maps to see how much it actually adds. But I definitely did feel like I got more stuff off of bosses because I was taking this, and I definitely could tell that they were more dangerous. I did some testing with Conqueror maps, testing with like doing Baran when he had this bonus, and he was quite gnarly. But I think Shaper Guardian bosses are quite a bit easier, and I didn't really find any of them to be all that dangerous. The only time that I ever died in all of the testing of doing this, all of the running through it, was just one time where I said, I wonder if I could take this Phoenix Explosion, and no, I could not. So let's talk about what this actually makes, what it does in terms of generating profit. And here I have my dump tab from 20 maps, and as you can see, the main thing that it generates is kind of everything. It generates a lot of maps, like a lot of maps. It also generates a fair amount of currency. It generates a lot of in-game boss invitation fragments in terms of Shaper fragments. It generates a lot of Maven's writs. And these were nerfed this league since normal and Uber bosses now use different fragments, but prices have shifted because of that change. And so profit margins on farming and selling Shaper fragments and Maven fragments, that's still profitable. There's still a lot of profit to be had from that. It also generates a lot of scarabs, as we can see here. Scar, that's a ton of scarabs there, a lot of them. You also can get awakened gems. You can get awakened gems just from killing bosses that are being witnessed by the Maven, but then you can also get a higher chance of getting some of the not as valuable awakened gems, but still some of these can be worth a good bit just from doing the Maven invitations. You also farm up all flame embers, as I have typed out here. I've typed in ember, and you can see I farmed up a fair amount of embers, over a divine's worth. And then finally, you get a lot of corpses, and I emptied out my corpse graveyard before I started this. As you can see here, I have a lot of corpses. I've been selling a ton of corpses and still filled up nearly 3 quad tabs full of them even still, but this is just the corpses that I farmed in the span of 20 maps. This is one regular tab, and then most of another regular tab filled with corpses. I also left a lot of like 1 chaos corpses on the ground throughout the runs. I didn't want to like fill up my bags with randomize all the nearby guys' corpses. I didn't think those were worth it. So in terms of whether this is fun or not, yeah, I think it is. I think this is definitely very fun. It's very fast paced, very zoomy, and I do find that to be fun. Even though we're basically full clearing all the maps, you know, we're not literally getting down to 0 monsters, but we are getting down to under 50. I still find it to be quite fast, quite fun. I was zipping through these maps in under 3 minutes on average, and I felt that was pretty good. The only map that I really ever felt like I maybe stalled and was over 3 minutes on kind of a consistent basis would be Chimera, but that's just sort of the way it goes with Guardian of the Chimera. So in terms of what you do, you run the Shaper Guardian map sets with Maven, then you run the invitation, repeat, repeat, repeat. And one of the big advantages in this patch is that because invitations are no longer a dropped item, you do those 4 maps, then you come talk to Kirak with some alchemy orbs and scours, just in case you need to, like, you get a build disabling affix or mod on the invitation from your first alch. But if it's good to go, you alch that thing, you run it, you kill the guys, and you get out of there. No having to trade with people to get invitations, no having to farm invitations. It really removed a lot of the friction, a lot of the frustration of doing Maven invitation rotations. And it's so much smoother and faster and more convenient to do now. So now I'll talk about the setup that I went with here, and let's start with the Atlas passive tree. I think that makes the most sense. So since we are using the domination scarab of terrors, I wanted to take all of the shrine nodes I could. So we're getting a shrine from supplication. We're taking these 2 small passives that give us a 20% chance at an additional shrine, and these 3 that do the same thing. So we're getting 2 guaranteed shrines from the Atlas passive tree. I take the covetous shrine point just because, it's fun. It's a bit of quant and rarity, and maybe you get something useful out of it. I didn't in this set of 20 maps, but maybe you will. And then I just like the other shrine powers. They really do make zooming through the maps quite a bit faster than it would be without. Like, I really thought that this was going to be more in the 4 to 5 minutes per map kind of range, considering I was pretty much full clearing all the maps. And then I was blown away. There were a couple of maps, Minotaur maps and Phoenix maps where I look at the timer on as I'm zoning out, and I've been in the map for 1 minute and 50 seconds, and that is substantially faster than I expected to have full cleared and looted a map that is Mavened up and has thorough exploration and has over 6 extra map bosses scattered throughout it. That is really a lot faster than I was expecting to be zipping through, but it feels pretty good. So because we're killing a lot of map bosses, we're going to take all the bonuses that apply to map bosses. So we're going to take Vivid Memories to get more synthesis maps. We're going to take Remnants of the Past to get Shaper and Elder Guardian maps. And we're going to take Conquered Conquerors to get Conqueror maps. But that's not all. We're also going to take Chittering Champions so that we can get a 25% chance to get an extra scarab off of every single one of the map bosses. And that does apply to the Maven ones as well. And we're also going to take Significant Troves so that we have increased chance of getting regular scarabs off of all of the unique monsters in the maps. That can be rogue exiles or that can be map bosses. We're also taking, all of the usual stuff that we would from Necropolis, all the Embers of the All-Flame drop chance, all of the stuff to juice the Lantern of Aramor and give ourselves stronger Devoted modifiers. And then because I am corpse farming, I'm taking a lot of corpse nodes. I took the Decisive Souls metacrafting stuff. I didn't actually get any good metacrafting mods for my corpses, or at least not any of the really high value ones. So this wound up actually being kind of a waste of 3 points for me, but it's okay. I also come down here and take Geminate Haunting just to give myself more corpses, lots more corpses, that's the whole thing. And then we're taking all of these map nodes because we really like maps. And taking Shaping the World gives you a 5% chance for every single one of those map bosses that you're adding into your map to throw a map at you. You're taking Shaping the Mountains and Shaping the Skies just to get more maps, get a little bit more extra value, a bit of extra free map device value out of every clear. And then on top of that, we're basically just taking all the map mod effect we can just to kind of increase the quant and rarity of the maps. There's not really any other stuff that we could take in the Atlas passive tree to really juice that. And one thing that you can do is you don't have to do this as a Shaper strategy. You can do it as an Elder strategy. So you could come up this side instead of this side. Or if you wanted to do it as a Conqueror strategy, you could take all 4 of these points here. You could even do potentially just as kind of a change of pace, do a little bit of a synthesis farm strategy, although scarabs won't work on that, but you can do a little synthesis farm strategy. And so you can kind of fluctuate a couple of points around based on which set of guardians you're farming. And that's kind of just a free bit of extra, 2 floating points that you can throw around for those purposes. But otherwise, we're taking all the map mod effect nodes, and then you just kind of have a free point floating around. You can throw here to get some extra scarabs. It's up to you. Ultimately, I played around with all different guardians, and I like Shaper Guardians the most just because I like the map layouts the most. I think they're the most consistent, and the bosses are kind of the least annoying of the 3 sets of guardians that you can run. I find Shaper Guardians to be, just kind of the least irritating, personally. Okay, now let's talk about the scarabs that we're running. So Domination Scarab of Terrors is obviously required to run this strategy, since the whole point of it is to have every single one of the shrines have an Atlas boss hanging out at it, and then all of the final map boss bonuses will apply to those Atlas bosses. Now, there are kind of a couple of approaches you can go with here. You could just like put one of these in and then just throw as many Domination Scarabs in as possible and just force as many shrines in as you can, and then the map bosses won't be as juiced as they could be, but there will be as many of them as humanly possible. You know, between using the map device to get 3 and the Atlas passive tree to get 2, and then 3 different scarabs, that's 6. So you could get 11 Atlas bosses, as well as the actual boss that's in the map, and then the up to 3 that the Maven would provide for, what is that, 11 plus 4? So that's 15 possible map bosses. That's pretty good. That's certainly one strategy. I did play around with that a little bit initially. I ultimately opted not to go that route. What I went with was I started using Influencing Scarabs of Conversion. I found that this made me substantially over sustain maps. As you can see, I'll show this here. This whole set of maps, right? All of these, what is this? Over 20 Elder maps and quite a lot of Conqueror maps and Shaper Guardian maps and even some Synth maps. All of this came from only 20 maps. So you substantially over sustain just by using these Influencing Scarabs of Conversion, and they are quite cheap. I also used a Cartography Scarab of Duplication because I thought if I get any tier 17 maps, I'd kind of like for those to duplicate. Now, I kind of feel like you could go either way. You could use 2 Domination Scarabs and an Influencing Scarab of Conversion, so a setup like this, where you're getting the Domination Scarab of Terrors, you're getting almost as many Atlas bosses as you can, and then you're getting a bit of map sustain. Or you could basically go the exact opposite duration, have fewer Atlases, or fewer Domination Shrines, fewer Atlas bosses, but give yourself a 60% chance to duplicate all the maps, basically 60% more maps. I think this is probably the strongest setup if RNG goes in your favor, but it is more expensive. These Duplication Scarabs are quite expensive, like 8 chaos or so each, whereas these Influencing Scarabs are only like 1 or 2, and these Domination Scarabs are like 2 or 3, so they've kind of fluctuated in price. I've seen them go up to be quite expensive, and then I've seen them drop quite a bit down. Now, the Domination Scarabs of Terrors are fairly expensive. I've seen them range anywhere from 4 to 5 scarabs per divine orb, so that's like 30 to 45 chaos a piece. I did have a handful of them hanging around, but I ultimately did buy like 2 stacks of them in playing around with this strategy, and I definitely think they've paid off for themselves. Like, substantially they have paid off for themselves, so I don't feel bad about the relatively high expense, but you know, you could potentially run a strategy that just doesn't play around with this at all. I don't think it'll be as profitable or as fun, but it is something you could do. So in the end, this was the Scarab setup I went with. Domination Scarab of Terrors, 1 regular Domination Scarab to get that set of shrines up just a little bit, 1 Duplication Scarab. I kind of hedged my bets between these 2. And then I did use the Influencing Scarabs of Conversion just because they really help you over sustain on maps, as you can see. I also use Domination in the map device because, you know, that's really the only thing that makes any sense. All right, I was cleaning out my tab here. I was cleaning up from having finished recording, and then I realized there was one thing that I know will get a lot of commonly asked questions if I don't address it first. Why not use Cartography Scarab of the Singularity? You know, you're farming anywhere from like 9 to 12 map bosses per map. Why not get a unique map from every single one of those map bosses? So I think this is a good question that I've asked myself, and the reason for that, because I did play around with this for a while, was I just went and looked at the unique map drops that exist and just kind of looked at all of them and realized, okay, so Doriani's Mechanarium, that is not capable of dropping normally. Cortex isn't capable of dropping from map bosses either. Infused Beachhead isn't. Vinctar Square isn't. So what does that actually leave in terms of maps that can drop that are in the tier 16 range, that are of value, that are unique? Coward's Trial, Putrid Cloister, and Twilight Temple. Those are all worth 20 chaos or more. Everything else is worth basically 5 chaos or you know, none, because it's going to be really hard to sell any of them. And for the most part, none of these sell in bulk anyway. You're only able to sell these one at a time, so you might be able to farm up 20, 40, 50 of them over the span of a couple of hours and then spend the next month trying to liquidate them all. So I think that this Scarab, even though it's only 1 chaos, I think it's actually a bit of bait. I think it probably will do less for you than even just adding like another regular domination scarab and getting 2 more map bosses into every map, and also 2 more shrines worth of packs of mobs and buffs and so on. So I thought about it. I played around with it a little bit, not in the span of doing this like 20 maps, but just beforehand. And I basically just found that I kept getting like a bunch of Vaults of Edziri and Pillars of Aaron and, you know, just junk pretty much. So I actually didn't care for it, didn't think it was any good, but did think it was worth addressing because, you know, it makes sense as something that could be good, except that they made it so that Cortex maps are no longer capable of dropping from map bosses. You have to actually run synthesized maps or do these synthesized map boss invitations in order to get Cortex. And that means, yeah, adding unique maps onto all of the map boss drop table just isn't really very good. And so now let's take a look at my spreadsheet here and just kind of see what the profitability on this was. As we can see, I counted the price of the maps as 10 chaos apiece since they are Shaper Guardian maps. I thought that was kind of a high number, and that's fine. Always okay to err a little bit on the side of being high. The conversion scarabs and the domination scarabs I put at about 3 chaos each. Duplication scarabs I said were 8, and then terrors I thought were about 30 chaos each. That was my experience of buying all of them. I don't say this enough in all of these sort of profitability breakdowns. This isn't a guarantee. Your RNG may be different from mine. It may be better. It may be worse. The prices may change. The costs may go up or down. The profits may go up or down. Ultimately, that is all stuff you'll have to kind of figure out on your own. And, you know, this is just my experience with it and kind of my guide with it. What won't change is the map device price. I can guarantee you that the map device domination price will still be 3 chaos if you're doing it this league. This is just a quick breakdown of my Wealthy Exile tabs here. As you can see, just a lot of stuff of value in the main dump tab, and then also my 2 corpse tabs. And those are what I used for tabulating everything up that went into my spreadsheet. So as you can see, it's kind of an even breakdown across all of the different sources of currency. I got a lot of currency from scarabs. I got a lot from maps. I did get a fair amount from regular actual currency, a fair amount from corpses, a fair amount from fragments. I got a little bit from embers and awakened gems, and also from div cards randomly. I just got some random embers that threw like some not really all that valuable div cards at me, like the nurse is only worth like 5 chaos now or something. Yeah, great. But then I got just some like regular div cards from doing Shaper Guardian maps that were actually somewhat valuable. So in the span of running all of these maps, it basically took right about an hour, 3 minutes a map, right around an hour for the whole set of 20 maps. And I made about 14 divines in that hour, and I think that's pretty good. Except if you've kind of been paying attention to my bag, I didn't make 14 divines because I excluded one really big ticket item that dropped for me in the last map. And that was this scarab right here, the Divination Scarab of Curation, which is worth like 5.5 divines. So obviously I didn't want to include that in a breakdown because that doesn't really seem fair, but I actually made over 20 divines in the last hour of playing the game. And that is sort of a thing that can happen with this kind of a strategy. You can just kind of randomly get some massive home runs, and that is why I love all of the map mod effect, the adding pack size and quantity and rarity into these maps, is sometimes they will just hit you in the face with a massive amount of money, and that feels pretty good. But I didn't want to include that in a breakdown and say, I guarantee you will make this same amount. You will definitely get this super valuable drop every hour, because that's not realistic, but it is nice. So in terms of difficulty, I would say that this is tier 16 Maven content, so it's not free, it's not super easy, but compared to the tier 17s that I've been doing recently, has been a substantial step down in difficulty. I found this to be a nice, pleasant change of pace. I think the grueling tier 17 content was really like, not stressing me out, but it was definitely like pushing my build to its limits, and I was having quite a lot of fun with that. And this has been pretty pleasant and smooth, and I mean, easy by comparison. With that being said, getting random map bosses means that sometimes you will walk around a corner and have to deal with a really, really nasty map boss, so you always want to be prepared for that to occur. A lot of the map bosses won't have their full movesets outside of the arena though, like the ones in Bramble Valley, for example, where you have to fight the 3 different harvest bosses. If you run into that boss in a map, it'll just be the first one, the purple boss, and she won't turn into a tree and summon monsters. She'll just try to stomp on your head and you dodge it and you kill her, and then she just dies like regular style. So a lot of bosses that are normally tough and frustrating, like that Bramble Valley boss, will actually be super, super easy. It's a little bit weird. All right, one last little bit of complexity I want to share here, and unfortunately I think I've used all of my embers that would apply to this, but if you get some of the Necropolis monster mod bonuses on your map device, you put the map in, you press go, and then one of the monster mods shows up that grants extra stuff from the strongest monster in a pack. Like it says the strongest monster has 1750% increased quantity, or the strongest monster in the pack converts items into div cards or scarabs. Then what you want to do is you want to use all flames on those packs. Preferably you want to use all flames that convert all of the enemies into just one monster, and that means meat sacks or anarchy all flames are really kind of your best friends here. Meat sack ones I think are a little bit better and generally a little bit cheaper, but Rogue Exile all flames, the anarchy all flames, took a huge nosedive in price recently, and frankly, they're actually still pretty useful for this specific purpose. So be aware of those, keep your eye out for those, and be ready to just like throw in those all flames and get yourself a bunch of huge loot explosions from random dudes throughout the map. All right, that's it. I found this to be a really fun twist on an old favorite. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and thanks for watching. Bye.